If you have a GTIN that has the wrong indicator digit, then you're not allowed to bring that product in because it's a mismatch. So then you have to stop everything. That was kind of motivation for us to try and automate as much of the master data management as we could.
Hello and welcome to the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US, a podcast in which we explore the mind-bending world of global supply chains, covering topics such as automation, innovation, unique identity, and more. I'm your co-host, Reid.
And I'm Liz.
And welcome to the show.
Reid and I just had a conversation with Steve from RxERP. If you wonder how our pharmaceuticals get from beginning to end in the supply chain, this is the conversation for you. We talked about the importance of the data that accompanies that product through the supply chain and how getting it right at the foundation of information is very, very important. Steve, welcome to the show. We are so excited for this conversation with you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate you guys taking the time.
We've done a lot of conversations on Food Safety Modernization Act. So I feel like this is going to be a little different flavor for our audience. So I'm really excited to get into this. So to start us off, can you just introduce yourself, your role at RxERP, and the problems that you're focusing on to solve?
So Steve Madsen, founder, CEO of RxERP. We are the only serialized inventory ERP that exists. And we were kind of born out of necessity. My brothers and I, we used to own a wholesale distributor in the pharmaceutical supply chain. And this really started as kind of an internal project that we'd made. So we had gone about kind of the traditional route where we had an ERP and a serialization solution, as well as 5 or 6 other systems we needed just to kind of maintain our day-to-day functionality. And after running through it, we were just doing a lot of what felt like creating Band-Aids and being very reactionary. And so we tried to diagnose where the actual disease was, where was the main problem coming from, instead of just trying to fix all of these kind of outcomes. And we came to the conclusion that we believed it was going to be that the inventory itself was not serialized. So I was able to talk my brothers into building an internal system where at first the effort was, look, we're just going to take over the inventory and we're just going to serialize it. And then we're just going to kind of see how that goes. We had ended up building it, and in the process of building it and launching it over a couple of years, we ended up absorbing pretty much all of the other software suites that we were leveraging at the time. When we were doing that, we were able to scale the business significantly, and the system was able to keep up with all of it. And on top of it, all of the efforts that we were making to maintain serialization and to really try and keep up with everything as far as like the day-to-day goes, just ended up smoothing out considerably. And so kind of our theory was right, where it was the fact that we had 2 disparate databases that we were trying to constantly align, and there's human error, there's integration error, there's just all kinds of problems with trying to go with that model. And we had ended up kind of solving for it, and we realized, man, the market might actually need this. I mean, if we were struggling this much, then, there might be some actual usage here. And we were very early on the serialization play. I mean, we were doing this years before it was required, but we knew that this was going to be a massive impediment for us if we couldn't sort it out. And so we had ended up inviting 6 beta clients in, vendors and clients that we were close to at the distribution company, to beta it with us. So we betaed it for about 2 years, went through multiple federal, state, third-party audits, just really tried to make sure that the system was doing what it needed to, because the repercussions for DSCSA aren't, light. They end up in orange jammies and no one wants to be there. So he spent just as much time as we could and tried to get as many opinions outside of us as we could to make sure we were okay. And when we came out kosher, we realized, okay, like this is probably the right time to do this. And we ended up selling the distribution company and taking this to market full time. So the approach we tried to take was, so there's some folks I think that try to solve complex problems by creating complex solutions. And I'm just not smart enough for that. My goal was to make a very simple solution for a very complex problem. It's kind of one of those, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter. Where it's like the more you chew on it, the more you realize, what can get better and what we can thin out and what we can automate. And we chewed it to the bone. So we went to market, about 18 months ago, with that being the case. So a very different approach to how to solve serialization and all of the offshoots of what that means to be able to just take a bottle through a warehouse compliantly.
I wanted to ask you too, one, DSCSA is Drug Supply Chain Security Act. It rolls off our tongues because we practiced it. And when you talk about serialization, is that at the case or the bottle or both?
So there's actually 3 different levels of serialization, 4 technically. So you have the each is what it's called, unit. And that's like your bottle, your vial, whatever the lowest saleable unit is. You then have your inner case or your pack. That can be in a case of 12. They could shrink wrap, 6 of those so that you could have a saleable unit, quote unquote, that's serialized of 6. Then the third level is your case. So that would be all 24 units, or it could be 2 inner packs and 12 eaches. And then the very highest level is going to be your SSCC. It's a serialized transaction to say it went from this owner and here's the serial number of this, everything that was included within that kind of transaction that's occurring.
There is a lot to this. You mentioned orange jumpsuits. You call them jammies. We've heard people say, you got to get an orange jumpsuit. What I would love to know is when you look at healthcare and pharma today, where does the data fall apart and how does that ripple into bigger headaches with DSCSA requirements?
That's a really good question. And honestly, a big part of the reason that I think, spurred us taking the direction that we did, the offshoots of the problems that can occur are kind of exponential, honestly. If you have a GTIN that has the wrong indicator digit, so an indicator digit will essentially identify what level of serialization you're dealing with, right? Am I dealing with an each? Am I dealing with an inner case? Am I dealing, or an inner pack, or am I dealing with a case? All of those are identified uniquely within the GTIN. And if one of those are off, then you're not allowed to bring that product in because it's a mismatch. So then you have to stop everything. And I mean, when you're talking about when you get up to real volume, this becomes disastrous. You have to stop everything. You have to try and contact your upstream authorized trading partner, try and correlate where the mismatch was, try and figure out why the information they sent didn't match the master data you had on file, try and get it updated, try and document the update to make sure that you're doing so compliantly. That was kind of motivation for us to try and automate as much of the master data management as we could. And GS1 being, the partner that you guys are, have created a solution that allows for that to be the case. So when we were building this, we realized that you guys are kind of the repository. And if we could use you as our immutable truth, then we could bring all of that master data into the system. And there isn't that misalignment of master data between trading partners, because now all of the possible indicator digits, all of the possible different levels, a manufacturer can't just willy-nilly kind of change that. They need to register that with you to make sure that they're staying up to date with master data management. So with that being the case, we eliminated, like I said, a lot of the integration issues, and then we eliminated the human error issues. I'm the most guilty of fat fingering. When we were building this, I worked in the warehouse to try and figure out what the easiest flow was going to be. And I was the worst offender in master data management. I was kind of the reason that I built it the way it is, because it's like, okay, if even I can't mess it up, then that's the goal that we're shooting for right now. So yeah, the ripple effects, and that's just one example of, a real time, this is actually halting processing of product. It's actually taking, an inordinate amount of human concerted effort to try and overcome something as simple as a 5 not being a 6 or something like that.
we have something exciting to share with you, a special podcast discount for our favorite event of the year.
GS1 Connect.
That's right, our annual supply chain focused conference, and this year it's in Las Vegas 2026.
I cannot wait. Reid, how many GS1 Connects have you been to?
I think it's been 7. This year will be 8.
That's awesome. I have been going to Connect before it was called Connect, so I very much love meeting all of our attendees every single year who bring so many great examples from grocery, food service, retail, and healthcare about how they solve supply chain visibility challenges. And in 2026, Las Vegas gives us the perfect excuse for a few puns about how GS1 Standards can help you make bold moves that lead to big wins.
Oh, I see where you're going. GS1 Connect is your chance to deal yourself a winning hand in operations with the power of GS1 Standards.
Wait, GS1 Connect is also the perfect place to hit the jackpot on connections from the exhibitor floor to the networking tables and forge high-value relationships that pay dividends long after the bright lights fade.
Learning strategies worth betting on for sure, Liz. Hear from trailblazers across industries and walk away with bold insights that help you turn risk into reward.
Okay, I think that's enough puns for the day, but maybe one more. If your supply chain feels like a roll of the dice, GS1 Connect in Las Vegas is your sure bet for success. So mark your calendars for June 9th through 11th and join us at GS1 Connect. It's time to take your supply chain game to the next level. And this year we have great news for anyone ready to plan to attend.
That's right, Liz. We do have an early bird registration is officially open. If you register by March 31st, you can save 10% on your conference pass. Just head to connect.gs1us.org to secure your spot and take advantage of the early bird rate. Whether it's your first time to GS1 Connect or your 12th, like Liz, or more, there's always something new to learn and new people to meet.
Don't forget, register by March 31st to get that 10% early bird savings. See you there. Leaning in to that human error, because we all know that these processes still are very manual, and there's hand keying and there's sending of spreadsheets and all of these very non-digital ways of exchanging data. And especially because you're talking about a regulated environment, is the master data where mistakes tend to happen, or are there other places as well?
I would say it's the main offender in my experience.
Okay.
It's master data will typically, I would say, out of all of our EPCIS problems, which is essentially the electronic packing list, right? It's got a list of the trading partner it's shipping from, the trading partner it's shipping to, all of the GLN, SGLN information, as well as all of the GTIN, SGTIN information. I would say that the majority of issues that we come across are a misalignment of master data. On rare occasion, it will be, hey, this was poor formatting, or this wasn't issued correctly. I would say most of the time it's a misalignment of master data. I think human error is a very large cause of that kind of being the case.
It's funny how those two kind of go together. I correlate it to some smart home connections I'm trying to make, and is this a human error? Is this a technology error? I mean, once you figure it out, technology, when it works great. But when it doesn't work, everyone wants to take a sledgehammer to it. What I want to understand is, when you're automating this master data, like when you get to where you're full on automation, I know people get this wow factor, right? The customers are noticing this wow factor. I'm curious, is the wow factor, once the master data management is aligned and automated, is it the speed? Is it the confidence? Is it the accuracy? Is there still questions? But what are your customers walking away with and saying, wow, like this is game changing for us?
Yeah, honestly, it's all three. The way that we've been able to kind of automate and solve for this is relying on the sources. So we have the FDA database that we pull out of directly. We have your database that we pull out of directly. And we've leveraged AI and leveraged, as many of the resources as we can to align the GTIN with the NDC automatically, for instance. With that being the case, it takes quite a manual effort. Because in a traditional sense, when we were doing this, it was like, okay, in my ERP, I go and I create my SKU, which I'm going to use the NDC, right? I then have to, on that same SKU, align the GTIN and the levels of GTIN in my ERP. And then I need to go and do the exact same thing in my serialization solution to say, hey, here's the GTINs that this is going to identify and the list of, and the NDC that it's going to be correlated to. Now, in doing so, you can see that that effort being manual takes up a considerable amount of time, as well as creates a lot of opportunity for that fat fingering human error. And in product creation, it takes it from, all of those steps and all of the time. And now you can create the product within the system and have the master data fully aligned in literally one click. And you guys have, kind of facilitated and enabled that by having that source of truth that can be drawn from. You go from someone who just spends an inordinate amount of time as kind of data entry, master data management, and they see that and it's like, oh my gosh, like this in every aspect of my life, this is going to make it better.
Especially when you talk about master data, something is so basic and I'm going to say boring, but to those of us who love master data, it's not. But when there can be a wow factor around master data, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit. We had talked about the different levels of compliance, and I think there's 3 levels, and how, again, having strong master data can help enable each one, especially when it comes to DSCSA compliance. Can you walk us through those?
We've walked through kind of the 3 different levels within the GTINs and the different levels of cases that could be processed. And the reason that's important is because if I'm a manufacturer who's going direct to dispenser, whatever, or 3PL, whatever the case might be, if I get an order for 24 units and that's all in a case, I only need to verify that top level of serialization. So it takes a scenario where I got to cut into boxes, cut open inner cases, and scan all 24 units to where now, if done properly, the data is going to help tell me all of the units that are within that box. So I can scan the top level. It has all of the children inside, the 2 inner cases, and it's going to allow me to get that off the shelf very easily, very quickly. So having all 3 levels within the GTIN itself is incredibly important whenever you're looking at kind of the real world application and approach to it. And that was really something that I spent quite a bit of time in the warehouse trying to smooth it out, because I felt like the solutions that I was working with, you could kind of tell very much that they were built by technicians and not by a real world experience, right? And like I said, it was very complex solution to complex answers, which can work. That is definitely an approach that can be leveraged. But while we were doing it, it helped me gain an appreciation for kind of the way that it was structured as far as the GTINs were, to make sure that we're trying to leverage as much of the tools in master data as possible to just get the whole goal for everyone is get product out the door compliantly. And especially within pharmaceutical. These are life-saving drugs. These are, a diabetic's metformin. This is their insulin. This is going to be a very crucial product that need to get out, and they do need to get out compliantly in order to really maintain that, the products are valid. But having the master data and having that ability to kind of stack it like that helps to make that as smooth as possible. There's other areas with your GLN management, we do the exact same. So whenever a client registers with someone in our system or a vendor, they bring a vendor on, part of DSCSA is that you have to be interacting with what's called an authorized trading partner. Now, an authorized trading partner kind of has two sides. You have the serialization side, meaning they have an active GLN that is tied to the physical shipping address where they are custodians of the drugs. That's thing one, and that's where we leverage GS1. Thing two is they need to have valid licensure for the entity, and that address on the licensure needs to match, again, that same shipping location that is tied to the GLN. So when we're having a client register or when we're processing through like that, we automate that ATP certification, which is just one of the other sides of master data management. And we do leverage quite a bit of AI in this, where we can bring the information in from your database as a source of truth, and then we're able to collect the licensure for the applicable transaction that's occurring for the parties that are involved. And we can say, here's the licensing information, here's the shipping address correlation, here's the entity alignment. We're able to automate that interaction that's occurring is now an authorized trading partner interaction, whether it's bringing product in or whether it's shipping product out. And we don't have to have the manual checks that we had before, where someone would have to manually check all of that to say, hey, this client is purchasing a scheduled product, but it looks like we only have their DEA license or their state license on file. We're lacking the DEA. So there's these scenarios where, as these transactions are occurring in real time, we are now able to say, and the way that I kind of look at it mentally is, you have a GLN road that has to be driven. Meaning, if I'm coming from this GLN and arriving to my GLN, I need to verify that connection, that part of the road is stable. And then when I'm going from my GLN to my client's GLN, I need to make sure that portion of the road is stable. Once that road has been aligned, verified, authorized, certified, whatever word you'd prefer, from there, you can drive as many of those authorized GTINs down that road. And so that's essentially what we tried to set up, was to say, okay, the master data that is needed and the verification that is needed, not only on the serialization side, but also on the licensing side, has to create the certified road that these products can now drive down. So that's another area where the master data management, as far as GLNs and making sure that you're dealing with an authorized trading partner, we've really tried to push to leverage to make sure that it's operating properly.
I find that fascinating. I love the analogy or metaphor of GLN roads that has to be taken. Never thought of it that way before, but I was thinking too of like just the ecosystem of logistics, right? We have 3PLs, you have your own distribution centers, like it's never the same thing. And I think a lot of folks think of logistics as linear when it's really a web, especially nowadays with what's happened with COVID and, all this other stuff. We've been talking about master data. When do I know that master data is really my problem versus something else that's my problem? Like, are you seeing indicators out there where it's like, oh, that's a telltale sign, that's your master data problem?
I feel like, honestly, that was the reason for building the system, because for the first bit of time as we had our company set up, our old company set up under that infrastructure, I felt like I was chasing ghosts, where it was constantly trying to just figure out, okay, where's the source of the issue that it feels like I'm consistently dealing with, even though it might be over there. I feel like this is, like you were saying, I like the web analogy, because it's been funny with my team. We've been joking, or it's kind of an inside joke, that in software, typically you build a happy path. Everything goes great. It walks down this path. Everything's ready to go. But in pharmaceutical, and especially pharmaceutical logistics, the system is like 5% happy path and 95% unhappy path. Just because the web and everything. It's not just, hey, I got product, I'm going to send it out. Like, yeah, that's great, but that is the smallest bit of, what needs to be handled. I mean, the error handling, the mismanagement of master data, that really is kind of the biggest pain that we've experienced. But that was essentially our journey, was just trying to figure out what was the source of this. And that was the biggest, that's what we came down to, was it was the fact that information was separated. So if you're chasing master data ghosts, if you're constantly coming back to GTINs, to Ipsos errors, to inbounding, and you can see the symptoms even with folks that we're connected to for our clients upstream, where you will have the Ipsos that's inbounding, and there's a lot of, you can tell, master data issues that has. We can't process it. And then there's this, this big back and forth of how to align that with them, how to make sure that that's the case. But you can start to see those symptoms kind of across the board.
So if people are chasing ghosts, what should they do? Mm-hmm. What is something that you could give as a quick tip to those who may feel overwhelmed and don't even know where to get started from a master data perspective?
I would leverage as many resources as possible, because we've also had, and the foundational resources. I remember back in the day when we were building this, we were getting kind of those Excel files, right? To say, hey, here's my master data, send me your master data. And we were having consistent issues where those files were fat fingers. And then there was this back and forth of like, hey, wait a minute, that was part of what spurred us with just fully integrating with you guys, is you're the source. You're the ones who are going to help to mitigate that. So that was definitely a pain point that the only way I was able to solve it was just go to the source of truth. If you're struggling with master data, if you feel like you are, behind, because you guys have accounts for it where you allow folks to access that database, just like we do. I would try to go to the source of truth. I would try and go to the source of truth with the FDA as far as NDC information goes.
Just thinking of this with a conversation that literally happened earlier this week, where some folks are like, well, if I don't know what to automate, why am I automating it? And if I'm struggling, how do I begin? And I said, well, you need to consolidate, and you need to start automating so that you know where you're checking. And they're like, yeah, but they were on a merry-go-round. And I said, let me just use a simple analogy for you here. You work in a kitchen. Do you want everyone in the kitchen to touch the food? Well, no, because they might contaminate the food. I'm like, the food could be contaminated by itself and no one touches it. But the more people that touches the food, the higher the percentage that you could start to increase that someone could contaminate the food. So minimal touching. That's what automation is. Like, bring it here and then isolate to these spots. You're chasing less ghosts. Is that a fair analogy? Does that resonate with you?
A very fair analogy, and a great, really honestly, a great example. Like the only conclusion that I could come to, and thank God it's worked as well as it has, the only conclusion I could come to is make the data immutable from the sources. So when we bring it in from you guys, not editable. When I bring it in from the FDA, not editable. And again, I'm the main offender. I built this for me because I was the worst. So I just had to say, okay, what guardrails would someone, like me have to have in order to not compromise the environment? And that was the best solution we could come up with, was rely on the sources of truth and leverage that, because, it'd be one thing if you guys were like, no, call in to verify or email to verify, whatever options there are, but you guys have provided technological resources to be able to be that kind of foundation of truth and somewhere where someone can go to automate that master data management as much as possible.
No doubt. Well, this has been fascinating and has taken us down a path that we haven't been down in quite some time. And I know that you guys are breaking ground in new areas and getting a lot of buzz out there as well. So we wish you much continued success. Unfortunately, we're coming up on time here, but we always end with 2 questions. And Liz, I'll jump in here and go first. What's your favorite technology that you're using today? Whether that's professional or personal, but something you're using today that you're like, I just can't live without this right now.
Honestly, one that I'm kind of obsessed with, and we've created this partnership with a company called P-Chip. And I'm kind of obsessed with it because DSCSA has done an incredible job at custodial security through the supply chain. That's the main effort, I think, that DSCSA took, was to say, are we transmitting valid product from authorized trading partner to authorized trading partner and having all of the custodial boxes checked? And I think DSCSA does a great job at outlining that. A possible problem that I see, because I'm this big of a nerd where these are the kinds of things that I enjoy thinking about after hours with a cup of coffee. What about product security? We've done the custodial security, but someone that were so inclined, and there's certainly the money for it, someone that were so inclined would be able to, and nuanced enough, would be able to introduce gray market product into the supply chain if they understood all of the outlines. The reason that I've been interested with P-Chip, and we're running kind of a test case scenario right now, is P-Chip has developed a microchip that is GS1 compliant and how it could hold a GTIN. But that microchip is about the size of a grain of sand, and it is almost impossible to replicate. They're doing this already with, for instance, like luxury items, where if you go out and buy a $10,000 purse, then you can have this chip that's embedded in it. And the chip, all that it has is a unique identifier on it. There's no tracking, there's no other effort. But it's essentially saying, hey, this is a valid, whatever type of purse costs $10,000. We've been in discussion with them about pharmaceutical to say, DSCSA strictly prohibits the use of RFID. That's not our intent, is to use an RFID for identification. However, we are very interested to see, and we're starting with kind of these higher priced drugs, to say, if a manufacturer were to put this chip on the case, on the unit itself, it could then verify from the manufacturer themselves, because there would be an exclusive engagement with the manufacturer and no one else, where you would be able to take that chip and you would be able to have kind of that secondary validation on the product itself to say, yes, the SGTIN is verified through the supply chain and custodially everything is tracked. But if you were to find that unit and that microchip was a mismatch to the GTIN that's printed on the label, you would know that that would be a fraudulent or a gray market product.
Or not find the microchip at all.
Right, exactly. And the thing is, like, if you want to see motivation for this, I mean, the FDA has written this up as a case study you can look at, but there was a company, a distributor, who was distributing an HIV medication, and they lost the account. And so they ended up purchasing a ton of gray market HIV medication out of Brazil, took it to their repackaging plant in Puerto Rico, and they were repackaging it with American labels. This is kind of like the poster child for DSCSA. It's a fascinating read if anyone's interested. But the problem is that in the repackaging facility, they mismatched the HIV medication with antipsychotics. So you have all these HIV patients whose virals are off the charts, and the doctors are saying, are you taking your meds? And they're emitting, very curious behavior, and they're not believing the patient because tests don't lie and their virals are going crazy. So when they're saying, yeah, I'm taking my medication, I mean, it took forever to sort out. That is the reason. And DSCSA would have stopped those interactions, right? That interaction in particular. But it still leaves open, again, if someone is nuanced enough and the dollars are there to be plenty motivated enough to try and do similarly to where you'd be able to custodially introduce that gray market material again. So that's kind of the technology I'm a bit obsessed with right now, just because it could be an interesting one.
Okay, so the last question, just to wrap up. what is something new you want to learn, personal life, work life, in the near future? What do you want to learn about?
Well, my hobby is kind of agriculture. We keep sheep and we keep chickens and animals, and I'm always fascinated to learn more about that. I'm fascinated to learn more about my grandpa was a farmer and he drove cattle. And it's funny because, I knew him and I just thought you put seeds in the ground and food popped up. I was just very ignorant as to what that process was. And it's been very fascinating to go back in and to think how much was lost, generationally from that, all of that knowledge. And it's been very cool for me to try and kind of reconnect with that. And if I'm not learning about compliance, which, like I said, I'm that freaking weirdo who huddles up with some regulatory documents at night with a cup of coffee and is enjoying himself. But when I'm not learning about that, I'm very interested to see what makes things grow.
Well, somebody has to do it. I mean, thank you for all the work that you do to keep our drugs and medicines and all that safe. Because it's amazing what you guys have accomplished and throughout the supply chain. I love talking about master data. I could talk about it literally for the rest of the day, but unfortunately we have to wrap up. It's been so great to talk to you and to hear about the journey of your organization, just from the beginning in the warehouse and what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then being able to roll all of this out. So thank you so much. It's been awesome.
No, appreciate you guys taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Thank you for joining the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US. If you enjoyed today's show, you can subscribe to our feed or explore more great episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to share and follow us on social media. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.